not see a situation where I would have achieved what I've been able to without the experience that I had during my undergrad years at Barry University, to be specific. It really shaped um, my perception in a way that made me want to be part of the criminal justice system. That made me want to give back to my community. I really pinpoint that time in my early professional life of being an undergraduate at Barry that I really feel that I got to that level of social consciousness per se, or social awareness, that really led me to want to be part of the criminal justice system, part of a contribution to the community, and to really enact change, right? Because when we talk about whether it's criminology courses, criminal justice courses, sociology courses, all too often we talk about enacting change. You hear things of social manifestations or grassroots organizing in order to enact change. And one thing is participating in that. But one of the motivating factors for me was putting myself in a position where you could actually enact change and enact change within a community. For me, that not only do I serve, but I currently live in. So, congratulations to all of you for making it to this part of your professional career. You really, really have to value this point in your professional career because it's really going to mold the way you view things, what contributions you want to make, not only to yourself, to your family, but also to the community. And those are all things that you need to value now and understand that the decisions that you're making, the efforts that you're putting in right now are going to be well worth it and will prove to be something necessary in your future success. So, a little bit about me personally, especially since it's Hispanic Heritage Month. I was born in Cuba, raised in Miami-Dade County. My father was a political prisoner in Cuba. We came in 1979 under some freedom flights that existed at the time for um, for uh, for those who were political prisoners. So obviously, early on, as many immigrants to this country, we are continuously reminded, and I don't want to use the term burden, but we feel that obligation to satisfy or maybe give back and justify is a better word, I think, all the sacrifices, right, that all of our families made in order to come to this great country that we currently live in, that provide us with so many liberties that perhaps our parents or our grandparents and friends and family did not have the luxury of enjoying in our native land. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that, yes, being an immigrant, constantly growing up, being reminded of the sacrifices that were made in order for us to be able to enjoy the luxuries of this country, and the need to value and take advantage of the opportunities that this great country offers us. That was instilled early on, and I think in many immigrant communities and many immigrant families, I know it wasn't the case in mine. We're constantly reminded of that, of not foregoing such a great opportunity, not foregoing an opportunity, for example, that my father and mother didn't have, whether it was attending college or whatnot. I could tell you for me, um, going to college wasn't even a decision the way I was molded early on by my parents. It was almost like an obligation. It was almost uh, un- it almost didn't even have to be said. Honestly, it was an expectation that, after high school, that was just the natural progression, the natural next step, and that was instilled early on, and it was really, really helpful for me because it made that transition almost seamless in terms of knowing that I was going to attend college after high school. So I'm a product of the Dade County public school system. I wouldn't change that for the world. It was a wonderful experience, whether it was elementary school, middle school, high school. I'm a Hialeah High School grad. Go T-Breads. Those are important moments, obviously, that as you look back now, you recognize, even from childhood progressing into adolescence and whatnot, that being ingrained, certain commitments, certain obligations. Maybe some folks view it, I could see, negatively, but for me, it was a very positive thing. It was something that I really welcomed, and I never second guessed. I always knew that after high school or go to college and so on and so forth. So ultimately, I had a little hiatus playing football for a year in college up in Kansas, and then I came back to school, and my brother had graduated from Broward University. I was looking for purpose. And I honestly can say, even in high school, I really did not pinpoint what it is that I wanted to do. I can tell you that once I came back and started at Barry, it was clear to me. It was a huge driving force. The faculty there, the curriculum there, I truly, for once, enjoyed my educational experience, wanted to go to school, loved being there, loved studying the different subjects and courses and whatnot. And that really propelled me, I think, into wanting a career in public safety. I was never, in public safety, whether it's law enforcement, corrections, whatever you want to look at, you have a wide array of folks that get into the profession for different reasons. And you have the one stereotype, right? The person that from the moment that they're a kid, they're wearing a uniform. They always wanted to wear a uniform, or they're multi-generational law enforcement families. Obviously, me being an immigrant, and police not being viewed as a positive thing in the country that I was born in, I didn't have that luxury of having law enforcement in prior generations, or nor did I have the interest of being in uniform per se early on. That is something that came to me later on while I was in college, and it really interested me because I thought I could give back. I thought I could make a difference. I also wanted to be a college professor at the time, and during that time, I was working for my brother, who is a businessman in the private sector, and I was making okay money back then. And I know that there were certain sacrifices that I had to make to be a college professor and go on and get my PhD and everything else at that young age. And I really wasn't willing to do it at that point. I wanted to do both. I wanted to make okay money, give back, use some of the knowledge and some of the social awareness and consciousness that I had built during my time at Barry, to give back to the community, and at the same time be able to provide for my family in a way that I felt suitable. So shortly thereafter, after graduating Barry, I wanted to seek something different. I came to the Broward Sheriff's Office. I can't tell you why BSO, other than at the time, it was an agency that, apart from being a very proud agency, was expanding and growing at a very fast rate. We were building new jails. We were signing contracts with municipalities that expanded the scope of our law enforcement service to this community. We had brought on fire rescue. We were signing on other municipalities for fire rescues, expanding as an agency at that point. And I just saw a lot of room for growth. I saw a lot of potential to make a contribution. And I set myself out that this is the place that I wanted, to make a difference in. And Broward County was the place that I wanted to live, and I wanted to give something back to the community that I lived in. So shortly after working at BSO, I moved over to Broward, and I've been living in Broward ever since. I've been now with the Broward Sheriff's Office. Next month makes 21 years. I know Sergeant Botero's on. I cannot believe it's been 21 years, but it has. It goes by fast, and it's been a great ride at the Broward Sheriff's Office. But I did come here, like I said, especially since I was not one of those folks that always wanted to wear a uniform. I want to kind of put my toe in the water, so to speak, and test what it is that interested me. And I got to tell you, I was lucky because I tested the waters in the right department, and that was the Department of Detention. For me, if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. It's been a very rewarding career starting in DOD. The Department of Detention was probably, after getting my undergrad at Barry, the second most important decision I ever made. By far, the most successful decision I ever made during my career. I was drawn to DOD once I was there. I was drawn to the folks who wore the uniform. I was drawn to the opportunity to be able to speak to folks that were perhaps in custody, that didn't have the guidance that I had and that I mentioned early on, from my parents, from my family, from my friends, that didn't have, perhaps, even though I was an immigrant that came to this country with nothing, perhaps had even less than that, had less than nothing. And that really interested me, having that opportunity to try to enact change in them, and the teamwork that I experienced there was wonderful, and it still is to this day. And but with that comes challenges, right? And having said that it's Hispanic Heritage Month, it was a huge eye opener rather, coming from Dade County to Broward. You know, it's amazing. I tell people, you have this little imaginary line in 2000, I'd say at the time when I came over, you have this little imaginary line that divides two counties, one of which I currently live in West Miramar. So like if I turn left, I'm back in Dade. If I turn right, I stay in Broward. But for me, it was eye-opening in 2000 how that imaginary line really made a huge difference in terms of, having said that it's Hispanic Heritage Month, in terms of where Hispanics were in the rank and file within the agency, where Hispanics contributed locally as a county as a whole in the criminal justice system. It was eye-opening for me, honestly. I remember coming out of the academy in 2000 and 2001 rather, and we had one, and I'm speaking for the Department of Detention, we had one Hispanic lieutenant who, within 2 years of me being here, retired. And that was the highest ranking Hispanic that we had in the Department of Detention, a department that oversees over 1,600 employees, and which last year had a budget over $265 million. So for me, it was really eye-opening. Coming from Dade County, where growing up, dealing with law enforcement, having interned the state attorney's office, having seen the representation that minorities had throughout the rank and file in other agencies, for me, it was a little bit of a shocker not to see Hispanics represented in our command staff the way that I perhaps became accustomed to coming from Dade. And not to say that Dade didn't have progress to make in terms of increasing minority and women participation in the rank and file. They did then, but to me, it was even more eye-opening in Broward when you jumped that imaginary line, the difference that existed. And I share with folks, I haven't had many, honestly, negative experiences, but early on, I did have one with a field training deputy who was assigned to train me. I had, I believe, 3 or 4 of them during my training, 3 of which were amazing. Still talk to them today, and led me the right way. The other one, the experience was a little different, but I still talk to him today, and I thank him rather, more than I thank everybody else. And the reason why is he did say something to me that was negative, that did motivate me. I'm not going to lie and say it wasn't a motivating factor. And that was early on when he saw this young kid coming out of the academy. I was very motivated and wanted to take on the world, so to speak, and make a huge difference. he told me, he's like, you're Hispanic. If you really wanted to make a difference, you should have stayed in Dade County because Broward's a different animal. And I remember that like if it was yesterday. We were, I could tell you the unit, the jail that we were in when he said that to me. And that I used as a little motivation throughout my career. And it's been an excellent ride. I'll tell you, you see a lot of firsts. So I've been told, you're the first Hispanic captain in DOD, first Hispanic major in DOD, lieutenant colonel, and then as recently as 2019, Colonel Lorena on the law enforcement side, and myself, who got taken out of the Department of Detention by Sheriff Gregory Tony and brought over to the Department of Administration, were the first Hispanic colonels. And a lot of times when we talk about diversity, there is a key element that we forget to address. And I want to address it here today because it's very important and it's crucial. And it's that in order to really create a diverse workforce, in order for you to be the first in anything, especially when you talk about culturally, race, gender, age, you have to have somebody who doesn't look like you, doesn't come from the places you come from a different gender, from a different age group, believe in you and afford you that opportunity. And I think oftentimes we overlook that. And it's important to note that it's because of ultimately our efforts, the teams that we work with efforts, our co-workers that support us, the loyalty that we build, everything is a huge contributor. But in the end, and I have some pictures in the back of folks who at some point in time saw something in me or believed in me enough to promote me to the next level or trust me with that important project or just knew that I would get the job done. They had to look different than me. They had to be from somewhere else, or else I wouldn't be the first. Somebody else would have been the first, or perhaps the person extending that olive branch would have been the first. So that's a key element. I think we all once get to the point where I'm at, where I'm ready to give back, and you never stop giving back, but I'm talking about from a diverse standpoint, making sure that your rank and file mirrors the community that you serve in and the demographics, even within your agency. There is a responsibility that we all have to extend that olive branch and provide opportunities to folks that don't necessarily see things the same way we do, that don't come from the same backgrounds. And I can't overspeak that enough, because if I didn't have folks, whether they were Caucasian, African American, women, etc., that believed in me, I would have never been the first anything. And that goes beyond public safety. That goes in your classrooms. That goes in your day-to-day life. And you can't really overlook that. It's truly important. So it's a very rewarding, and I've said it 3 times. I'll probably say it 5 more times during today's colloquium. It's been a very rewarding career. I can tell you currently I oversee the Department of Administration. For some of you, you might think, what does that entail? So currently I oversee our budget, finance, purchasing, and that goes both for all of the above. That goes for our civilian side, that goes for our law enforcement, fire rescue, and our Department of Detention side as well, for a total of like $1 billion budget that we currently operate. Probably the biggest challenge that I see day to day is how we allocate those funds when everybody's concerns are a priority, right? And I agree that they're all a priority, but at the end of the day, you only have a given set of dollars to go around. And that's truly the biggest challenge from a day-to-day perspective. But 2 things I want to leave you with, which I'll always get asked when I speak to students, and then we could maybe take some questions and have more of a dialogue rather than me just sit here and talk about me, which is not my forte. I rather talk to you all and see what interests you all. But one, regardless of what career you set out to take on, find a niche. We live in a time of specialty, very specialized um, time we live in today, where everyone has a specialty in something. Find your niche. I'll tell you this, sometimes, and that is in my case, the niche finds you. For me, as someone who never saw someone growing up try to commit suicide or try to hurt themselves, um, I didn't know that when folks were suffering from said crises, from those kind of mental health crises, that I could remain calm and talk to those folks, even in the middle of the crisis itself, even in the middle of the act itself. It's something I kind of walked up on, so to speak, one day in my role as deputy sheriff in the jail. And it kind of steamrolled. It became a thing. And when folks were in crises, it became, call Deputy Reyes. And then after that, it became, well, there's a sergeant position available, and the mental health unit needs somebody that can talk to folks. And then it was put Sergeant Reyes over there. So that niche kind of found me. I didn't find it. I welcomed it. I've always enjoyed talking to people, but to be able to talk to folks in perhaps their most of crucial moments, their most of critical moments in their life, was something I found and felt normal doing at the time. And you know what? I wrote it. I don't want to use the term exploited it because it has a negative connotation. But for the day-to-day operations, I became that guy, and there's nothing wrong with you finding a niche, and whether it's computer programming, finding a specialty that everybody comes to recognize you as, uh, you are the young woman for the job. This is, if you want this to get done, go see so and so. And for me, that really resulted in a lot of positive experiences, and it gave me a lot of opportunity for growth within an agency as large as we have, where we have over 5,600 employees roughly. So find your niche, regardless of what field you go in, regardless of what profession. Try to specialize yourself in that niche and be the go-to person in that niche. Secondly, and perhaps the most challenging for all of you because of today's day and age, and that we live in, and how we communicate with one another, and the challenges that present itself as a result of social media, as a result of texting. Oftentimes, I mean, I've been asked by parents, "Oh, what's the one skill I need to teach my kids in order for them to be successful?" When I have a sergeant talking to deputies, "Hey, what's the one thing you want me to instill with them?" And that is communication. Uh, we're texting a little too much. We're messaging electronically a little too much. And in public safety, for the most part, we don't have the luxury to respond to that crisis, to that call for help with a text. We don't have that opportunity to like a comment or follow somebody in return for them calling 911. You need to be able to talk to people, and that includes getting out of your comfort zone. I know you've heard it before in your undergraduate days, time and time again. We all have, where one of the biggest feared acts in this country is public speaking. You hear that time and time and again. Well, it's only getting more and more difficult because we're getting more and more away from it. And perhaps you don't have to feel comfortable talking in a group of 200 folks. But when you're talking about public safety, it's critical that at the very least, you feel comfortable talking one-on-one. You feel comfortable opening yourself up to the person that you're dealing with out on the street, in the jail, in a community program, if you're working pretrial diversion, or in the courthouse. It's important for you to be able to communicate your message clearly, and have that person understand your message, and obviously, partake in those things that you all learned during your undergraduate days, whether it's active listening, showing empathy. These are things that a lot of times get lost in electronic messaging, so to speak. And it is, as someone who oversees a very large department, I can tell you it is the most undervalued skill in today's day and age. And when we look at recruits, when we look at applicants, the biggest challenge, I'd say by far, we experience currently as an agency is folks coming in that truly don't have that communication skill. In the jail, we call it verbal judo. It's that ability to talk to folks, to de-escalate moments of crises. Also exists out in the community for our law enforcement partners, and even with our fire rescue partners when they respond to a call and the patient has experienced trauma, being able to be empathetic and be able to bring down the level of concern and be able to make the person feel comfortable so that you can perform your duties the way you were trained to do. So those are the two big things I'll tell you in terms of recommendations as you build on in your professional career. Definitely look at finding your niche, your specialized area that interests you, and sometimes, in my case, finds you, and use that to your advantage to grow yourself professionally. And last but not least, and I know it's probably the most difficult one for you all, based on the technology that's out there and what's out there today, it's make sure you grow from an interpersonal skills and interpersonal communication perspective. That is right now a undervalued skill, and I'm telling you, as generations grow, it's going to turn around, and it's going to be one of the most valuable skills anyone who is an employer or who manages folks will be looking at in prospective candidates. So with that, Rudy, I don't know where you want to take it, if you want to take some questions, or perhaps you have some questions, Dean.
Yes, first of all, let us all give a virtual hand clap. Click on your reactions, people. Do the hand clap. He was wonderful, amazing. I'm so grateful to you and for you. We do have questions in the chat. I do have my own questions, but I want to give service first to those questions that are in the chat. I also want to give a shout out to my fellow associate dean, Ed Barry, who oversees our professional and executive development side of the house, as well as my buddy and friend, Associate Dean Jamie Martin from the English department. So several people are here to witness a really great talk. So thank you so much. You kind of answered this question, but I just want to give it justice and ask it anyways, just in case you wanted to add something to it. So Deanira Fortunato, hopefully I said that correctly. If I did not, please feel free to correct me. But ask the question, what were some challenges that you faced throughout your process? And even if you want to expand it to what do you think other Hispanic law enforcement officers might deal? And of course, how did you get through it? So what were some challenges that you faced and you see other Latin officers face as well? And how did you and they get through it?
Yeah. Well, I alluded to, I think, the biggest one, right, which was not seeing a representation when I got here, being raised in an area where I saw representation. Again, for me, it turned out to be a positive. I used it as motivation. It also let me open myself to be mentored by folks who didn't look like me, who didn't come from areas where I came from, who had completely different experiences, and that really, provides you with room for growth, right? When someone who just sees something in you, looks different, comes from a different background, is willing to invest in you. So I'd say that a lot of the challenges that I met here, I either personally turned them into a positive, or they were positive blessings in themselves. In particular, like I just mentioned, the being mentored by folks who perhaps didn't have the same experience as we do. The other part is, as Hispanics, we feel very comfortable with our Spanish language. For me, that was my first language. So one challenge, and it's something that I am very self-conscious about, and I always try to educate others and try to share is, you get two or three of us in a room, before you know it, we feel like we're back home and we're family and we're talking to each other in Spanish, not being sensitive to the fact that there might be somebody else in the room that has no idea what they're saying. And, the challenge being, you have folks that welcome it, and then you got folks saying, well, wait a minute, are you talking about me? And that's that sensitivity that, being a 23-year-old at the time, your eyes get open to, right? And you learn along your journey how important it is to be sensitive to those others' needs, especially when you work in an agency as large as ours. So we almost, I feel at least personally, responsible for making sure that everyone in the room either speaks the language or at the very least feels comfortable. Because I know I have a lot of friends that speak Creole, for example. I feel very comfortable with them speaking Creole, first and foremost, because I can pick away, being raised in Dade County, at what the subject at hand is. But personally, I feel very comfortable with that. Other folks, not so much. And that doesn't mean that because I feel comfortable, everyone should feel comfortable, right? We still have to be sensitive to those challenges. I'll pretty much leave it at that, because honestly, most of those challenges really serve to me as motivators and positives to want to do better, want to give back, want to enact change. And ultimately, when you get to a position like the one I'm in now, is to give back, right? To give back to all those folks that did so much for you in order for you to get to where you're at. Because I'll tell you what, any professional journey, it's a team effort. Whenever I hear someone say, oh, you accomplished this, that, or the other, I'm like, well, I wish I had the list of who accomplished this with me, because the list doesn't fit in this room, right? And it's important for us to acknowledge, all those folks.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point. I'm from Miami as well, so shout out to the 305, right? There's just something a little bit different about us. No disrespect to the 954 people,
Right.
but one of the things that you brought up was a really interesting point. There is a different demographic in Broward, even though it's South Florida, especially when it comes to the Hispanic community. It is different. Another takeaway I got from your talk was that sometimes the niche finds you. And one of the things I want to share with the students especially is, but you found your niche, or the niche found you because you kept going. You were constantly engaging, constantly improving on yourself. And to your point, right, you became the go-to person, which I thought was great. Rosanna Santana asked the following. What advice would you give to young Hispanic women nowadays who are trying to become police officers?
Okay. Well, sometimes you need to be the trailblazer, right? And other times you need to be able to reach out to those who have made those trails for you and tap into their knowledge, their experience, because they can save you a lot of time and headaches. I wish I had a Colonel Reyes, so to speak, coming up that could have told me, hey, young man, go ABC, and it would have saved me a lot of time, a lot of effort that perhaps I exhausted in the wrong thing. But it was part of the journey and part of the learning experience. I don't regret that. However, for someone who is starting like she is, or looking to seek that, find that person that is in that position that you want, that you're interested in, and tap into them as a resource and ask them, hey, what did you do from day one? And what do you wish you could do differently if you had it all over again? And what is it truly that you do on a day-to-day basis? Because I have to tell you, as it relates to public safety, I had a benefit of coming into public safety with the simple want or urge to make a difference and to enact change. What that was exactly, I didn't know. One thing, and I alluded to that niche. One thing is we also have a hole with the generation we currently have in school is We have a whole different extreme. You have people that know exactly what they want to do and they want to do it tomorrow, right? And my biggest worry is they gear themselves, even from now as an undergraduate, for that point without doing enough research. And when they get there, they're like, well, wait a minute, I didn't know that this encompassed A, B, and C. Nobody gave me that unfiltered version, right? This is really not what I wanted to do. And when you box yourself into that corner, so to speak, you're really limiting yourself. So I would say to reach out to Hispanic women leaders in law enforcement, and ask them, what their recommendations are, what motivated them, what took them to the next level, and what also, as they look back, they wish they would have done differently, because that's going to help her save time in her journey.
Excellent feedback. Associate Dean Barry says good morning and asks this question: can you please share some of your experiences while you were at the academy?
This isn't, and excuse for me asking the question the way I have to. I have to call him this. This isn't Sergeant Botero asking this, right? Because he should know my experience.
No, no, no. Associate Dean Ed Barry.
My experience at the academy was a very positive experience. I can't say more for how positive that experience was, in molding me and motivating me, and showing me, as someone who played ball for a while and then stopped, how important physical fitness is to your day-to-day, not only physical health, but mental health. I had a we had a very diverse group in my academy class, and the dean, perhaps can remember, as I alluded to earlier, in terms of an agency, we were growing exponentially, and so was a lot of different areas of the county. And as a result, I remember, just from a correctional academy standpoint, if I remember correctly, we had 3, maybe 4 academies going on at once, and we had 3, maybe 4 academies going on for law enforcement. And the build out that you currently have, or the footprint, wasn't the footprint back then. So we were all over each other, but it was a fantastic experience. We had, the diversity we had in my class, I think of, age, gender, racial diversity. It was something else, and it was a very positive experience, because while you perhaps do a lot of group work, in your undergraduate years, and I did my undergraduate before I ever even applied at BSO, so I got that out of the way. You don't experience a true team mentality, like I experienced in the academy, uh, as an undergrad. You just don't. It's a no leave any man or woman behind. It's, going that extra step, even if you know the material, assisting those who perhaps are not getting it. Or for me, being a young buck, 23, single, no kids, maybe it was helping that person, that mother of 3, which we had, who was a single parent, in her 30s, hustling to make it through the academy. Maybe it was explaining the material in a different way that the instructors didn't deliver on, that really got her to understand. So those things, those experiences really go with you, forever, because their experiences and their personal situations became mine, and mine became theirs, albeit mine was a lot simpler because I had very little things holding me back or tying me down. And some folks in there had a full plate, and it was very challenging for them. For others, the physical fitness component, which came to me pretty easily, for them it was very difficult. And there was Saturdays that we showed up to help those folks, and kudos to Sergeant Botero for making it happen.
That's awesome. Alberto Perez asked the following: Colonel Reyes, in your opinion, what traits are essential for being a great law enforcement officer?
I touched on the biggest one, communication, being able to speak to folks. And it goes beyond speaking. That's when you bring in the interpersonal communication component of it, and being able to actively listen, and just not hear the person, right? Listen to what they have to say, be empathetic, be able to explain to them what your role is, why you're there, um, be able to kind of regurgitate to them as part of active listening what it is that you're understanding that they're trying to tell you, so that nothing gets lost in translation. Because again, we're talking about a very diverse community that we live in, and a lot of things can get lost in translation, from culture to culture, and area to area, even within our county. So it's very important. I'd say by far, is being able to display interpersonal communication. Patience is you heard patience is a virtue. It's something that you need in this field of work. I could tell you, not only for the boots on the ground, but even as someone who wants to make some differences and make some change. It's the quicker you understand that this is an aircraft carrier and not a ship or a boat that you could just turn, and that effective change takes time and takes effort, uh, the more successful you will be. But by far, I think patience, being able to keep working on your interpersonal skills, that doesn't stop at work. It sure doesn't stop at home. Those are the two key. And obviously, you spoke about this. Obviously, always advancing, right, and making yourself better, seeing what's next out there to tackle to make you more of a full faceted professional. Not that such a thing exists, but you want to get as close as possible. You want to put yourself outside the box. I was always an operational guy. I was always the one that was day to day operations, and was face to face with the inmate population. I was that sergeant. I was a lieutenant, and I had to make that transition as I got to that assistant director, director, and now executive director. You got to make that transition into the administrative realm, so to speak, never forgetting what you learned from the operations, right? Because that's the beauty of it, saying, hey, I coming up, and that was it. And I spoke to what the field training deputy told me that motivated me. But one of the biggest motivators that kind of linked to that was putting myself in a position where I could fix some of the things that I thought needed fixing, right? So, and with that, I needed more professional growth, and that's when you see even post employment, looking at other courses, other certifications, whether it was a master's degree or leadership type courses that develop us even further. So don't see your undergrad experience as something that's going to get you to what you want. See it as just one step to developing you to be better prepared for what you want, and realize that there's going to be many more steps for you to take to continue to develop and improve upon yourself.
Yeah, and I think you also answered in that comment also another question Alberto had, which is, what kind of courses helped you out in undergrad or college for your communication, but it was undergrad, graduate school courses in general. Damien asked this, Damien O'Rourke asked, what obstacles do you imagine would be becoming a veteran looking to adjust the civilian sector of law enforcement? So it seems as though Damien is a veteran. So thank you for your service, Damien. And now he wants to be in law enforcement, but on the civilian side, what challenges do you think he'll have going in that different direction in that different world?
Having now been in a position now going on 3 years where most of my departments are civilianly manned, perhaps is the way, or consist of civilian employees, whether from a budget perspective, a purchasing perspective, finance, records, warrants, that kind of thing. I can tell you, I see his concern, and I've seen it play out in the workplace, which is, we don't see it as much from our veterans into our law enforcement, because obviously it's a paramilitary organization. with a defined structure, reporting structure, and you have that. And I'll say the word with repetitiveness. You have that structure per se, and in a workplace where the majority of the folks might not have that veteran experience or that prior law enforcement experience, sometimes that structure lacks a little bit, right? And I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that it's a negative. What I'm saying is it's just a different environment. You don't have that reporting structure, so to speak. You have more of a think tank, perhaps, is a better term, where people come together, share their ideas, brainstorm, and then kind of go back and go about their duties in that manner. So I could tell you from some of our veterans, some of which currently are assigned to me, I think the biggest adjustment for them is leaving that structured environment into the civilian world where there's more gray area, perhaps, and making those decisions collectively. Where perhaps in the military, whatever Sarge says, that's what we're doing.
Awesome. Leanne Cameron asks, how can you improve on leadership?
How can I guess I would have a follow up. How can I, or
anyone in general,
as a whole? Well, again, leadership in itself is a journey. So it never stops. You never stop learning every day. And the quicker you recognize, and this is a key thing that I say all the time, especially when some of my key folks retire throughout our rank and file, is if you're looking at an organizational structure, if you're looking at a rank and file, if you're looking at rank specifically for leadership, then you've missed the ball completely. You've missed the ball day one. I have had deputy sheriffs, I've had civilians, and I've had folks all through the rank and files that I consider to be true leaders, effective leaders, perhaps some of the best leaders I've ever worked alongside or had the privilege to work with, period. And I think all too often when we look at an organizational chart, we look up for leadership, and sometimes the leaders are right next to us. Sometimes the leaders are working for us. And sometimes you notice that everybody's looking at you, and that maybe, just maybe, you're the leader, and you got to kind of take the bull by the horns, so to speak. So I think the quicker that you recognize that leadership is a journey, it is something that's not specific to a position, but rather something that someone develops and works on and carries within, regardless of position or responsibility or whatnot. I think the more prone you are to build yourself as a leader, and you can learn from any leader, a good leader or a bad leader. We've all had bad leaders, and I tell everybody, you have the responsibility. You know bad leadership when you see it, to say, okay, I need to make sure that, number one, I'm not doing that, because sometimes we're doing things that we don't even notice ourselves are being interpreted as bad leadership. But to make that commitment to yourself that you won't yourself display those traits that you yourself were critical of, right? I think that's a responsibility that we all have to bear on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I love that so much. One of the reasons why I love that, I keep going back to something you said, which will stick with me for a little while. Sometimes the niche finds you. And how do we engineer us being a go-to person for something? And the reason why I think this is important and it ties into leadership so brilliantly is because there are many people who feel as though you either are born a leader or you're not, right? And I think that what you're sharing is you can be a leader for certain things that maybe you're not a leader on this thing, but because you're the go-to person for this thing, then you are the leader, right? And so that's something important for us to think about. So I have a question. So I'm glad I'm able to ask my question. So I'm reading this book, right? Great book. I recommend people to read it. James Clear, Atomic Habits. And one of the things he talks about is environmental design, right? That our habits are really birthed not out of a willpower, but out of the system we're creating. Now, you said something that was very interesting to me, and I wonder how it impacted your career. You talked about your father being a political prisoner in Cuba. And then you end up working in these detention facilities as well. How did your father's experience as a political prisoner impact the kind of environment that you were creating for inmates? How did his experience allow you to see the humanity in them and treat them as such?
Well, it had a huge role, right? Because I heard of some of the inhumane practices that still today exist in my country. It was a huge role, and it. Funny thing is the conversations, right, where I found myself justifying to my father why certain treatment of our inmate population was necessary. Because obviously, when you have an experience like his, some of the experience is internalized, right? And you almost accept what is being done to you at that time. And for me, it had a huge impact because I found myself, number one, justifying my perhaps proactive take on, pretrial diversion, for example, or reintegration efforts back into the community post release to my father, because obviously in his experience, none of those things. I mean, he was lucky if he got something to eat and drink, right? So to go from that extreme to have to explain to him, hey, this is why this is so critical. This is why it's so important that we do this. It actually provided me a venting mechanism of sorts, and it almost justified my position, almost made me feel vindicated. I was doing the right thing, right? That these efforts were in fact necessary and they were needed. They were much needed at the time, and you build on that. And I had one sergeant tell me it was the simplest thing that he told me. It stuck with me still today, and it'll probably stick with me forever. And it's not something I only apply professionally. I apply it personally, which is, and it's a very simple thing. He told me, he's like, you know what? The whole objective of life for me is to leave things a little better than you found it. And such a simple quote was so like breathtaking to me, because somebody had never broken it down so simply for me. And whether it's my kids' education, whether it's the opportunities I provide for my family, whether it's what I do here on a day-to-day basis, it's at the end of the day, can I look at myself and say, you know what, I left things a little better? You know, is it to the degree perhaps that I want to? No, but I made progress, and we'll build on that progress tomorrow. So I think as I vindicated or explained to him rather the justification and the thought processes of why, in fact, the building on the humanity that is necessary in that environment, rather than adding to the burden that these folks are already feeling, right? By being away from their families, by perhaps losing their jobs mid career. Uh, it was important. It played an important role. And you bring that up, and I never talk about it, but I'm glad you asked that question, because it was many a conversations on many a night, that we talked about that.
It's so interesting because I think about my dad too. Now I'm thinking about it in the same situation where he and I would have these dialogues and have to think through things as to why I thought the way I did and why I did it the way I did. And so it is helpful. One of the things, over the last year plus, there's been a shift towards a focus on diversity and inclusion, but one that I think is often not discussed nearly enough is that E, right? Equity. And so example would be Broward College is a majority minoritized institution, majority Hispanic and Black. And yet our faculty, we do have Black and Hispanic faculty and administrators, but it doesn't reflect to the level of our student population. So my question to you is, do you think Sheriff Tony being African-American, do you think now you being Colonel, right? Do you think that opens the door for others? In other words, being that Sheriff Tony came from a diverse background, do you think it made him a bit more open-minded to promoting you to be Colonel?
Absolutely, without a doubt. And it goes beyond just the views and the perceptions that we apply from our life experiences to our professional experiences on a daily basis. It goes to the almost obligation that you feel as a leader of the agency when you travel outside of these walls, and you want to see this community reflected, not only with the boots on the ground, because at the end of the day we're much more than that, but as leaders that can represent that community and guide this agency to be reflective of the needs of that community. And absolutely, early on, the sheriff shared with us and this little post-it note that he wrote and posted on his monitor early on in his career. And in fact, if you go to his office today, it's on his monitor, and it says service equals reward. And something so simple that he probably wrote on a post-it note in his early 20s has really served for him as his guiding light, so to speak. And then him coming in and bringing that to us, coming up in a community, or the community I came up in, and the way I did, it hits home. It hits home, and you carry that responsibility, with a lot of responsibility, and I don't take it lightly. I know he doesn't. And you hope that folks that perhaps would have been discouraged in the past from saying, hey, I can do that, say, if he could do it, why can't I? So those are the things that really are important. And again, being reflective of the community, right? Being a decision maker, being someone who contributes, and be able to bring a different point of view. Because I got to tell you, I was in some meetings when prior to us being more reflective, and I've been in high level meetings as recent as yesterday, and the notice is palpable. It really is. And maybe as a minority, only the minorities notice that, perhaps, and I'm okay with that if that's the case. But um, the feeling of perhaps at certain times in my career walking on eggshells, so to speak, or feeling that perhaps because I came from different experiences or a different background, I viewed life a little differently, or the job or the profession a little differently. I tell you, it makes it so much simpler not to have that burden, and to be able to come to work and focus on the task at hand, and making this community safer, and making it more inclusive.
Awesome, awesome. Last question. What position did you play in football?
Oh, I played wide receiver and punt return.
Nice, nice,
Yeah, I was
nice.
I was I was not the biggest guy, never have been, but I was pretty quick, and I could play some football. But when I was up there, yeah, I wasn't big into school, so I thought, let me come back and focus on, and I'm glad I did. It was the best decision by far I ever made in my life. Coming back and attending my brother's alma mater there, Barry, and I can't say enough about Dr. Karen Callahan. I just got an email for Dr. Grizzle, who recently retired and moved to Arizona, but I can't say enough about the sociology and criminology department there. They are top notch, and they really, really, really shaped me to get to where I'm at today. So for them, I'll always be grateful.
Awesome. And I think that's important for our students to know that you may want to be in law enforcement, which is great, but definitely get your degrees first. Get your degrees first, and then engage in the field of law enforcement.
Yeah,
Well,
I'll tell you this, and I hate to interrupt you, but I say this often. Um, you know, I graduated high school early, so I graduated high school at 17. Um, I don't think I could have done this job at 17. I don't think I could have done it at 19. And honestly, even though I graduated, I want to say I graduated college at 21. I don't even know I could have done it at 21. So that maturity, being exposed to an internship through Barry at the Dade County State Attorney's Office, that started me maturing me enough. And then you got the academy, which is a wake up call and kind of, provides you that discipline and that structure that you need um, uh, in order to shape your views toward law enforcement and whatnot. I think the more preparation, the better. That's not to say that it's not your anomaly. Plenty of friends that started here at 19, but those folks had different experiences than I did growing up. They were privy to different, home structures and whatnot that perhaps benefited them and made them mature enough to be prepared to make that move. I wasn't. I'm glad I knocked out the bachelor's first for sure.
Awesome, awesome. And what I'm super excited about is I know that you have touched some people today. Your voice, your representation is powerful. I know that someone here, one of our students, is listening and is inspired, and then is going to have a wonderful career. And then 10, 15 years down the line, will come back to Broward College as a guest speaker. And I love that, right? I love that opportunity in the universe working in that way. We're so glad for, for all those, your father and him coming from Cuba, Barry University, everyone, because they gave the universe, us, you, Colonel Reyes, and we appreciate you. So thank you so very much. Again, people, virtual hand claps, thumbs up, you
Thank you
name
all
it.
for your time.
No, it was our pleasure, sir. Our pleasure. This was great. You all look forward to more of this, right? So we're doing a colloquium. This is what we do. I look forward to other opportunities to build you as professionals and as students and as human beings, period. Again, we are reaching the whole student. Big shout out to my executive assistant, Layla Bajou, as well, for her assistance in all of this, and the flyer creation, and all of that. So you all have a wonderful day. Take care, and it's been a pleasure.